Started.
Good morning, everyone in United States, and good evening to folks who are joining from India. Welcome on this Sunday morning for yet another roundtable discussion organized by the Council for Strategic Affairs. I'm going to share my PowerPoint briefly. So the topic of today's roundtable discussion is counter-terrorism measures, geopolitical challenges. Those of you who registered probably saw our flyer. That was the flyer that lists our speakers. And that flyer lists three distinguished panelists: Dr. Ramaharitha Pusarla, Brigadier Rumel Dahiya, and Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain. Just for record, today is November 13th, 2022, Sunday, 10 a.m. in the morning. I'll give you a brief introduction about the Council for Strategic Affairs. Council for Strategic Affairs imparts education in the field of international relations, I believe you can see now.
Yeah.
CSA encourages strategic studies in general to raise awareness. CSA aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. And finally, and very importantly, CSA condemns terrorism in its all forms worldwide. That is one of our specific objectives. That is also, in a way, topic of today's roundtable discussion. We have a monthly roundtable discussion. Usually it is held on a second Saturday of each month. For this month, we had some challenges about scheduling, so we are doing it on a Sunday. We also organize a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert on fourth Saturday of every month. We organize symposia, meetings, and conferences. We promote publications of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. We have a summer internship program for college students. Kindly visit our website, which is listed here, www.councilforstrategicaffairs.org, and also visit our YouTube channel. So as I stated, we have three distinguished panel members: Dr. Ramaharitha Pusarla, Brigadier Rumel Dahiya. Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain was one of the panelists. Unfortunately, he is not keeping well, and yesterday he was hospitalized. So in his place, Major General Jagatbir Singh has very graciously agreed to stand in at the last moment, so this program goes on. And I'm highly thankful to Major General Jagatbir Singh. So you will see her, Dr. Ramaharitha Pusarla. She is our first speaker. She's a freelance writer, blogger, and strategic affairs analyst. She obtained her doctorate in life sciences from Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad. She worked as a research scientist at SenBios. She completed a postdoctoral fellowship program at Penn State University on genome-wide nucleosome occupancy in budding yeast. And then she swiftly transitioned from academic research to generalism with a purpose. Over the last 8 years, she has published articles on international relations, politics, climate change, breakthrough science, sports, travelogues, etc., etc. She authored a book on foreign policy, a commentary on Modi's government's unprecedented outreach and its outcome. She currently works as editor-in-chief at My Ind Makers, a US-based website portal, and she has been a previous speaker and panelist in CSA programs. Our second panelist is Brigadier Rumel Dahiya. Brigadier Dahiya served as Deputy Director General at the now named Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis in New Delhi from 2011 to 2016. And that is the time I got acquainted with Brigadier Dahiya. He was gracious enough to help me attend their annual, conferences and, help me publish some articles. He is an Indian Army veteran with extensive command and staff experience spanning over 3 decades, including as a military diplomat in strategic affairs and counter-insurgency operations. He served as India's defense attaché to Turkey, Syria, and Lebanon, and with the Indian military training team in Bhutan. He also served with Military Operations Directorate of Indian Army and the Net Assessment Directorate at Integrated Defense Staff. Brigadier Dahiya is graduate of the National Defense College, New Delhi, and Defense Services Staff College in Wellington. He is widely traveled and has interacted with many global think tanks. He was awarded the Sword of Honor and Gold Medal at Indian Military Academy at his commissioning. He has also been awarded a Sena Medal for Distinguished Services. We have been trying to invite him for last couple of years, and finally he relented and agreed to participate in CSA program. Our final panelist is Major General Jagatbir Singh, and as I said, that he was gracious enough to stand in at the last moment so that this roundtable discussion goes on. Major General Jagatbir Singh, VSM, is a second generation Armored Corps officer. He was commissioned into 18th Cavalry in December 1981 and subsequently commanded the regiment from 2002 to 2005. He also commanded an armored brigade in the deserts, where he was responsible for its conversion to Arjun tanks. He has been an instructor in IMA and DSSE and served in the United Nations missions in Iraq and Kuwait and served as an AMS in MS branch. He subsequently commanded the 1st Armored Division and retired very recently in 2018 as the Director General Resettlements. He has been writing regularly on defense and security related issues for various newspapers, journals, and is distinguished fellow with United Service Institution, India's oldest military defense think tank. So we are honored to have Major General Jagatbir Singh join us for the first time, and I'm pretty sure it will not be the last time he will be joining us in our programs. Our topic for today is counter-terrorism measures, geopolitical challenges. All of us know that domestic and international counter-terrorism initiatives include very specific provisions to permit, require, and fund technologically innovative measures for counter-terrorism. Adoption of certain counter-terrorism practices can potentially have implications with regard to geopolitics. There's a need for solid conceptual framework that could provide critical impact on countries' geopolitics, foreign policy, foreign affairs for every CT measure taken. A little bit of information. There was a recent Congress in October, United Nations Counter-Terrorism Conference held in New Delhi, actually started symbolically in Mumbai on 28th and 29th of October, and these are some of the pictures. This conference ended with the famous Delhi Declaration on Counter-Terrorism. So United Nations Security Council Counter-Terrorism Committee, with representation from all the 15 UNSC members, besides counter-terror experts, made the mention in Delhi Declaration adopted at the end of this two-day conference. I'm not going to sort of read it verbatim, but this declaration called for urgent action for counter-terrorism through full and effective implementation of various UN resolutions and reaffirmed that terrorism in all its forms constituted one of the most serious threats to international peace and security. This committee conference was against associating terrorism with any religion, nationality, civilization, or ethnic group, and called on member states to continue their efforts towards comprehensive convention on international terrorism. Recently, there was another conference, high-level conference in Dushanbe in Tajikistan, again in month of October. And this Dushanbe process has been there since 2018. This conference was part of, the process launched in May of 2018 when first high-level international conference of the process of countering terrorism and preventing violent extremism was jointly convened in partnership with Government of Republic of Tajikistan, United Nations entities, and the EU. So that is a little bit about introduction. A couple of housekeeping rules. Please stay on mute to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone setting to vibration mode. Please don't interrupt our esteemed panelists. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to pose questions. No anonymous questionnaires. Questions are moderated and have to be submitted through the chat function. Please be precise and specific in asking questions. Don't send lengthy comments in the form of a question. Finally, like all our programs, we are recording this program. It will be available on a number of channels, including YouTube, Rumel, Odyssey, within next 24 hours. Without further ado, I'm going to invite our first speaker. We have three speakers, Dr. Pusarla, Brigadier Dahiya, and Major General Jagatbir Singh. Each of the speakers have 15 minutes each to make their presentation, and each of them have a very specific, unique topic on which they will be speaking, so there will not be any reduplication. These presentations will be followed by open discussion and question and answers. So it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Pusarla as the first speaker. Dr. Pusarla, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Namaste everyone, and namaste to my fellow panelists. Thank you so much. Just as Dr. Adityanjee has given a brief introduction about India, the topic as what were the initiatives India has taken after assuming the membership. India has been elected for a 2-year tenure of UNSC non-permanent membership for the 8th time in 2021. And it has assumed 1-month presidency in August 2021. And the slew of initiatives towards countering terrorism have begun from that time onwards. So with the presidency, India had, and it could do that, program could be extended for 1 year. Meaning to say that India had an opportunity to assume the presidency, 1-month presidency twice in the 2-year tenure. So whatever programs it has initiated in the beginning, it would even carry forward it throughout towards its tenure. And right now, am I audible?
You're audible now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So the three issues which India has chosen were maritime security, focused on protecting the global commons, and the second one was digital transformation of UN peacekeeping forces, and the third and the primary agenda constituted strengthening counter-terrorism efforts. So as a part of this, India has held an open debate on terrorism, which was titled Threats to International Peace and Security Caused by Terrorist Acts. So this has come at a watershed moment when Afghan Taliban has returned to power in August. That's precisely August 15th. And India has played a vital role in adoption of Council Resolution 2593, which called upon the Taliban to prevent any terrorist or terrorist group from using its territory to carry out any terror attacks against any state. So India has also used this opportunity to effectively highlight the terror threats posed from across the border, and rightly so. After Pakistani leaders and intellectuals have extended their congratulatory notes to Afghan Taliban after they took over the country, India's claims were subsequently vindicated and then have added strength to the narrative that Pakistan has been the nucleus of terrorism in South Asian region. And also, like with the erosion of civil liberties and institution of a non-inclusive government, the world could see what would happen when terror outfit could raise to would become in charge of a state. So, calling upon the Taliban, India has reiterated that Taliban should maintain a zero tolerance towards terrorism, and on this eve, and further on the eve of a UNSC ministerial meeting commemorating the 20th anniversary of 1373 resolution. Um, the importance of the 1373 resolution has been that it has paved the way for the establishment of a counter-terrorism committee. So under this, on this occasion, Jaishankar has proposed 8-point action to combat terrorism. And these included, like there should be no glorification and justification of terrorism, and fulfilling of obligations of International Counter-Terrorism Convention, no double standards in dealing with terrorists, which include no categorization of good and bad terrorists, stop placing blocks or technical holds on listing requests, and also discouraging exclusivity that facilitates radicalization and recruitment by breeding fear, mistrust, and hatred, and no political and religious considerations while enlisting and delisting individuals under UN 1267 resolution sanctions regime. And it has also appealed that the links between terrorist and transnational organized crime should be recognized, and member states should unequivocally call out the state protection of terrorists. And it has called for enhanced UN coordination with FATF to break terror financing networks. And it has sought adequate funding of UN counter-terrorism bodies to build capacities and to safeguard against the use of advanced technologies for terrorism. So with this, India has kind of laid a foundation for what it needs for the world to do to together combat the terrorism. So after that, like while India has done its part in helping in passing the resolution of in passing the UN resolution 2593, but later on countries have diluted it by removing any reference to Taliban. So this has highlighted the lack of consensus and double standards of certain countries. And then by certain countries, I want to draw your attention to two instances, like where countries have acted recklessly. First is like China. And China recently in the past 4 months, it has for the fifth time blocked the listing of terrorists, invoking a technical hold. And these included Talha Said, Sajid Mir, Abdur Rahman Makki, Abdur Rauf Azhar. and Shahid Mohammed. So this has been a continuing practice of China. But what makes it really very interesting is like Russia and China have abstained uh, um, from voting the UNSC resolution 2593, which calls on Taliban to deny any safe havens to terror. So that is one instance, and another instance which which has led to the destabilization of a South Asian region is like US has expedited its exit from Afghanistan, which has left a trail of mess behind and also region into, plunged the region into chaos and confusion. So these two instances highlight how terrorism is caught up by the political lenses, and it has remained a mere action point without any actionable measures. So this is to highlight that there has been a continued and prolonged lack of political consensus. But the only exception has been that all the member countries have been mm, unequivocal in their condemnation towards the terror organizations like ISIS and Al Qaeda. While this reflects that there is some kind of reflects a seldom and genuine acceptance towards unanimity towards counter-terrorism, but this isn't like a reason enough to cheer, because this itself wasn't enough to combat terror. But undeterred by the lack of political consensus and permanent members exercising their veto, India aspired to strengthen the existing mechanisms and initiatives. As a part of this, India has voted in favor of renewal of mandate of counter-terrorism committee executive directorate, that is CTED, um, uh, till the end. It voted in favor of renewal of this mandate till the end of 2025 in December 2021. So other than that, India has strongly advocated that member countries should collectively assess the shortfalls in counterterrorism efforts and contribute their might towards technical assistance needs of this counterterrorism committees. And also in January 2022, India assumed the chair of UNCTC, that is United Nations Counter-Terrorism Committee, which was uh, established in the aftermath of 9/11 attacks in US. So after that, after assuming the chair position, India has highlighted that the new challenges for the terrorism are mainly from the misuse of emerging technologies, and also urged the nations to strengthen the global terrorism strategy, that is CGTS. These observations are in line with the recommendations of the 2022 Global Terrorism Index, which also raised concerns over the use of missiles, drones, affordable smartphones, and social media that has extended the reach of the terror attacks and made the spread of propaganda and the recruitment of terrorists quite easy. All these things, India's efforts are in line with the fundamental aim of UN Charter, which asserts that maintaining international peace and security is vital. But terrorism has emerged as a major threat to this peace, so it is a bounden duty on the member states to collectively address this situation. So determined to fight this menace, India painstakingly held months of negotiation before holding two-day long UNCTC meeting. Symbolically, as Dr. Adityanjee has pointed out, India has held the first leg of the meeting in Mumbai, where the delegation has paid tributes to the victims of 26/11. And without naming Pakistan, India has played the audio clip of Sajid Mir, who engineered 26/11. Sajid Mir was the same person whose listing was blocked by China. So,
Pusarla, you have 2 minutes left. Kindly conclude.
sure, sir. So the major takeaways of the Delhi Declaration, which was which was the summary of India's proposal to or the framework to address the terrorism, was arrived at the second leg of the special conference on countering the use of new and emerging technologies for terrorist purposes held at Delhi. And this proposal has made important recommendations, which included that and also expressed concern over internet and social media turning into potent instruments in the toolkit of terrorist groups for spreading propaganda and radicalization and conspiracy theories. And also, India advocated that their member countries should strive towards fostering innovation that would prevent the misuse of financial technologies and crowdfunding platforms for seamless access to the resources. And it stressed on the need for developing anti-terror narratives and acknowledging the role of FATF. India has highlighted that when Pakistan was grey listed in 2018, there was a decline of 75% of a terrorist base on Pakistan territory, and the moment when Pakistan was declared out of grey list, the Indian intelligence agencies have noted that there has been an increase of terror bases by 50%. So this is to state that how a financial watchdog like FATF could exert pressure and could have a control in curbing the terrorism. And also, India highlighted the close links between the declaration highlighted close links between drug and arms trafficking and misuse of unmanned aerial systems, drones, and quadcopters that increase the accessibility of both drugs and weapons at the same time. And it has recommended that financial intelligence services should develop effective partnerships with financial service providers, social media agencies to trace the sources and methods of financing terrorism. It has called for traceability and transparency for financial transactions. And also it highlighted
Dr.
the use
Pusarla,
of
can you please conclude? Your time is over already.
Sure, sir. Just 1 minute. It has highlighted the use of cryptocurrency for terrorism, and also reinforced lack of uniform consensus on law and norms regarding the cyber crimes, and the weak control mechanisms of social media has in recent times led to the surge of terrorist activities, and noted the and also observed how dark web is bringing the terrorists and hackers together. So,
I think we need to conclude here now, Dr. Pusarla. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to invite our next speaker now, Brigadier Rumel Dahiya, so that we stick to the timeline. Brigadier Dahiya, the floor is yours now.
Esteemed distinguished co-panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to be speaking to you today on an important subject which has impacted us directly or indirectly for a very long time. As you all know, India has been combating terrorism right since its independence in various manifestations. At one level, it's a matter of concern that despite so much of experience in combating terrorism, we have still not been able to get rid of this scourge. But Simultaneously, it's a matter of satisfaction that despite lack of understanding by most of the countries about the challenges that we have faced in our nation building because of terrorism, we have been able to compartmentalize the impacts of terrorism and still be able to grow reasonably robustly. Now, as you all know, that Pakistan has been able to continue terrorism as state policy by keeping it mostly under the threshold of India's tolerance. And this tolerance, unfortunately, has been infinite. Exploiting geopolitical situation to its advantage when the situation threatened to go out of hand, such as the parliament attack, terrorist attack on India's parliament in 2001. Now, what has been Pakistan's modus operandi briefly? First, it tries to create deniability by showing terrorism and terrorists as homegrown, not even admitting that international terrorists such as Dawood Ibrahim are residing in open sight in a metropolis like Karachi. And also not claiming the bodies of the neutralized terrorists either on the line of control or anywhere inside India, including Jammu and Kashmir. It also tries to create justification of terrorism as a struggle for self-determination by people, and that's where comes this narrative of martyr versus terrorists. And we also know, of course, that not everybody is considered terrorist by everybody else. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But in case of Pakistan, of course, it has been rather expansive and extensive. Then comes the changing name of terrorist organizations. Like in 1999, when United States proscribed Harkatul Ansar, it was renamed as Harkatul Mujahideen. When Masood Azhar was left from India's jail from Bahawalpur near Jammu, near Kot Bahawal near Jammu, and he was released in return for hostages at Kandahar from the hijacked Indian Airlines plane. Then he opened something called Jaish-e-Mohammed, which was, of course, directly supported by ISI and Taliban. In February 2019, after Article 370 was revoked, Jamaatul Dawa, which was proscribed by Pakistan, it renamed itself as Al-Madina. And its charitable foundation, so-called charitable foundation called Fly-e-Insaniyat, was renamed as ISIL Foundation. A new name of LET cadres came up in Jammu and Kashmir in 2019-2020, and they started calling it the Resistance Front. However, their signatures were so unmistakable, and the same people who were part of LET now were leading the Resistance Front, so it did not catch much traction. Not prosecuting the terror accused is another method that is followed by Pakistan, basically to avoid opprobrium. Basically, the people like Lakhvi, people like Masood Azhar, all these people have been in protective custody of ISI rather than being in jail for the crimes they've committed. And it's a matter of interest to know, for example, that even Masood Azhar, when he gave instructions for carrying out the suicide attack on Pulwama, on a CRPF convoy in Pulwama in 2019, he was in the protective custody of ISI and undergoing treatment in a military hospital in Rawalpindi. Another one is that Pakistan's footprint in global terror networks and activities have been there in all continents of the world, and of course in Asia it has been particularly so heavy. In Southeast Asia and South Asia and in the Middle East, everywhere. In fact, any major terrorist activities taking place anywhere in the world so far have had a Pakistani sort of signature. Either a Pakistani citizen was involved in it, or at least the people who are involved in it have had training in Pakistan or backing from Pakistan. Then how does it do this, despite the fact that, it is so well known, its activities are so well known, and it has still avoided being proscribed, still being named as a state sponsor of terrorism? It's basically by renting its services to powerful backers like the United States, like China, like UK. Then, when under pressure, by handing over some accused from time to time. May not be the biggest person like Osama bin Laden who had to be killed, or Ayman al-Zawahiri who had enjoyed Pakistan's hospitality for such a long time, but other ones, drug dealers and small-time terrorists, etc., basically to ward off that instant pressure. Then projecting itself as a victim of terrorism and creating justification of interests to continue support to terrorists. For example, the ex-president Musharraf once said that how can we leave the Taliban behind? We can't cut off our support to them. They represent Pashtuns, and Pashtuns are an important part of Pakistani society. And since Taliban are important for our national security, Pakistan's national security, we cannot leave Taliban. So that's creating a justification of interests. Then use of religion for spreading nefarious activities. Use of religion is basically to justify terrorism, one part. Second is that when they come under pressure, then use the other countries which are co-religionists to ward off the pressure. Then displaying asymmetric capability to harm those who are tough on it. And this asymmetric capability is basically because the Pakistan narco-terror criminal syndicates are spread out throughout the world. They have deep connection with Pakistani deep state. And Pakistani deep state itself benefits, individuals of that benefit individually, as also the terror networks do that. And therefore, there's always a threat to others that Pakistan, with the help of deniable plausibility, will be able to carry out these kind of strikes in their own countries. Then leveraging both negative and positive attributes, such as what are the positive attributes, like size of its population, its location, religion, possession of nuclear weapons, and with the possibility, the negative one, with the possibility of these nuclear weapons falling in the hands of terrorist activities, terrorist organizations. And then exploitation of geopolitical rivalry, for example, between America and China. Now, the last one, the last two ones, one is hiding its involvement in terrorism. Pakistan has a history of killing individuals that expose these types of situations. Now, I met a gentleman once before he was killed by ISI, for example, Saeed Salim Shehzad, who was brutally executed by ISI in 2011 because he was going to write an article on inside involvement and infiltration of Al-Qaeda in the Mehran naval air station attack by Al-Qaeda. So he was going to write about it. He was warned by ISI not to write on this. He refused to comply with that, and he was bumped off. Similarly, recently, Arshad Sharif, a journalist who was killed in Kenya, was basically killed because he had set out to reveal or make it public the involvement of Pakistani deep state in drug trafficking to Europe and America through Africa. Now, the last one I'm talking about, the Pakistani modus operandi, is legitimate and illegitimate methods of generating funds for terrorist operations. Now, use of drug money for terror activities, but also lining their own pockets. Now, as per the study published by NATO this year, which is titled Narco Insecurity Incorporated, the convergence of the narcotics underworld and extremists in Afghanistan and Pakistan and its global proliferation, by David Winston. What comes out in this is that the regime of military ruler General Mohammad Zia-ul-Haq in Pakistan engaged heavily in heroin trade. And after Zia-ul-Haq left the scene, ISI continued doing this. In fact, once Nawaz Sharif disclosed that General Mirza Aslam Beg, who was army chief, and General Asad Durrani, who was the DG ISI, had requested him to permit them to continue using drug money for the covert activities like in aid of Taliban in Afghanistan and other terror organizations within Jammu and Kashmir. Now, all these are very well documented, and it's also documented. And you know, one of the people, the ISI, in charge of CIA for operations in Afghanistan, this gentleman he's on record having told a journalist who wrote a book that America sacrificed its fight against drugs for victory in Cold War. which means that even when the Mujahideen were so-called Mujahideen were fighting in Afghanistan, Pakistan was making use of this drug money to spread its tentacles and making money of its own and spreading terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, they collect money through religious endowments and charities. Of course, we know that the skins of the animals during Eid are collected by Jamaatul Dawa. And that money is simply goes into either the pockets of these terrorist organizations, leaders, or in support of terrorist activities. Use of religion for spreading terrorism, of course, we will discuss this. And then one of the reasons why somebody asked Jalmai Khaliljan as to why, despite knowing everything about what's happening in Pakistan, Pakistan has been able to ward off serious action by America. Interestingly, he said that Pakistan has the ability to charm various people by bestowing small or big favors on them, by acting as victims, and by also pledging to comply with any demands that are made on them. Now, this is a very important thing. Now, let me talk specifically about the role of geopolitics that has helped Pakistan obstruct counter-terrorism activities. You all are well aware about the ongoing debate of balance of power and global order. After the end of Cold War, America was the only power, and therefore the world was called a unipolar world. It has, despite all the noise about China becoming a peer competitor and an equal, frankly, the world has still continued to be unipolar, with a minor difference that the gap between America and China has narrowed, and many countries, including India sometimes, exercise their sovereign right to take decisions even if they are not approved by America. So they exercise the strategic autonomy. But the fact of the matter is that Bretton Woods or institutions and other sort of institutions continue to be under the power of one country, and that country is United States. So therefore, whatever action the United States takes against terrorism also willy-nilly is followed by others. As we are well aware that we have suffered terrorism since 1947, but terrorism became center stage only after 9/11. Before that, terrorism against us wasn't considered a serious matter. But after it happened, technological measures came in, the financial measures came in, United Nations Security Council started talking about it, sanctions started being imposed, countries started getting designated as state sponsors of terror, etc., etc. All these started afterwards. Now, as far as geopolitics is concerned, today, China has been now decided bipartisan support in US, which Dr. Adityanjee would probably endorse, that America has decided finally that China is the only peer competitor or going to be a peer competitor who can that can displace America from its perch of a global power, and therefore all-out efforts must go in to counter China and to contain China, and all possible measures, including restrictions on its finances, specifically sort of designating specific people as somebody who are persona non grata, the ban on sort of technology transfers, etc., etc. But you see, even this competition has given Pakistan room for maneuver. And the biggest example is that approval of this US $450 million F-16 fighter jet sustenance program, despite the President of the United States calling Pakistan is one of the most dangerous nations in the world in possession of nuclear weapons without any cohesion. 2 minutes? Okay, so letting Pakistan off from FATF grey list is yet another example of sacrificing counter-terrorism effort at the altar of geopolitical expediency. Now, why do you think the Americans feel so helpless in dealing with Pakistan, despite the fact that in numerous articles, books, and testimonies to the U.S. Senate and House of Representative Committees of Intelligence and Foreign Affairs, various people have clearly said as to where Pakistan stands. Now, some examples, for example, is Jalmai Khalilzad, I'll again say, who said that Pakistan is no doubt a state sponsor of terrorism. It's clear that Pakistan military and Pakistan intelligence provide sanctuary and support to Taliban and other terrorist organizations. He also narrated an interaction with Musharraf when Khalilzad was ambassador to Afghanistan and came on visit to Islamabad. And he said, why don't you hand over the Taliban leadership to us? And Musharraf said, where are they? If you have their address, please let me know. And if you have their telephone numbers, let me know. They're not there. Subsequently, of course, in 2016, from Dubai, he made this statement that, well, we have supported Lashkar-e-Taiba, we have supported JEM, we have supported Taliban because it was in Pakistan's national interests. So the fact of the matter is this, that America knew about all these people. Even Mr. Imran Khan admitted while on a visit to the United States, he said there were about 30,000 terrorists on Pakistani soil. So everybody knows that they were there. And yet they were tolerated. Why? For a simple reason. This can be, learned from various testimonies and all that. They say there are 4 reasons, basically. 1, Pakistan is important because it's a big country. It possesses nuclear weapons. There's a threat of nuclear weapons falling in the hands of terrorists. And if terrorism continues from Pakistan and Afghanistan soil, it hurts everybody else. Plus, there are always chances of Pakistan and India coming to going to war with nuclear weapons coming into play. And lastly, of course, Pakistan's ability to carry out those asymmetric challenges to America itself. So therefore, it is geopolitics that has kept Pakistan so far going and has not permitted, it has not gone under so far, basically because of geopolitics. Having said this, let me conclude by saying that every terrorist movement has a geopolitical background. After all, the Chechens were located in London. London was known as Londonistan for quite some time because of the present of this thing. Our Nagas and Mizos used to get support from China. Uyghurs get support from somewhere else. So therefore, you cannot separate geopolitics from terrorism. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Now it's my pleasure to invite Major General Jagatbir Singh to give his presentation on counter-terrorism challenges vis-a-vis China. So, Major General, the floor is yours. Please be our guest.
Good evening, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, sir. It's indeed an honor and a privilege for me to be part of this August gathering today, sir. I know I've stood in for General Hasnain, who is indisposed, but it is my extreme honor to be part of such an August gathering at Dr. Pusarla and Brigadier Rumel Dahiya. They have both spoken at length about the issues which you wanted to discuss. I will just, make my presentation a little brief. And the first thing I wanted to say is that the world has been facing, and India in particular, has been facing accumulated strategic adversities in the form of 4 strategic shocks that we have faced. The first has been COVID, that affected almost everybody in the way we functioned, in the way we worked, and it was a big strain on the healthcare system. No one knew how exactly we would overcome it. The second, of course, in India's case was the aggression and expansionism of China, 19, which we are well aware of, and which saw increasing collusivity between Pakistan and China also at that time. The third, of course, is the out of the US from Afghanistan, and that everybody has alluded to in some form or the other. They pulled out in August 2021, and August 2022, almost 1 year later, the number 2 at that time, or the person who replaced Osama bin Laden, was targeted in a safe house in Kabul, living in one of the most upscale neighborhoods, where he was targeted by a precision weapon, which ultimately led to his killing. And the fourth, of course, is what we're all countering today, is the conflict in Ukraine, which is today the world is interconnected in many, many ways. So we may be having differences with one country over something, but yet we're carrying out trade with that same country in an increasing manner. So the world today is highly interconnected. The global interconnectivity is such. Everybody has now realized what is the importance of Ukraine and how many items originated from Ukraine and how they've affected the economy, which has led to the strengthening of the dollar and the strengthening of the ruble vis-a-vis almost all other currencies. And our rupee has also dropped by about 10% ever since this conflict started. So, but in spite of, with all these crises, the action against the threat of terrorism has remained unabated. It has not ended. It is still there, whether it is in the forefront or background or receded to the shadows. It's only time will tell. Have we eliminated terrorism? I doubt it. Terrorism endangers innocent lives. It jeopardizes the security of states. Every country openly says we oppose it, we condemn it, but to fight it requires protracted effort and concerted effort. Protracted time, concerted effort. Brigadier Rumel Dahiya has clearly brought out how in India's case we have been combating terrorism in various forms and manifestations, and we're not confined to any one religion. Right from our independence, what is in 1948, when we had Lashkars come in from across from the tribal belt of Pakistan, supported by the all sorts of horrific things, rape, loot, murder in the towns of Baramulla. We've had terrorism in Northeast. We've had terrorism in the form of Khalistani terrorism. We've had issues, left-wing extremism. And of course, South, you had the issue with the LTT, where we lost a prime minister of ours to the killing by the LTT. So, I mean, this is something that everybody must like, emanating from terrorism, with Brigadier Dahiya has rightly said that we have overcome these challenges. The League of Nations in 1934 talked about prevention and punishment of terrorism. But as the world sees it, the global cycle of terrorism commenced, they feel, in the 80s and came to a head with 9/11. And because it affected America at that time, there were a whole lot of, orders, rules, regulations passed regarding this. But has it ruled the geopolitical and the strategic space for nearly 20 years? And are we going to see a new wave coming? These are the questions which we have to answer in future. The Middle East has seen a plethora of terrorist groups, be it the Al-Qaeda, be it the ISIS, be it the Hezbollah. I mean, we all know about it. And yet in one country, they are encouraged, and in another country, they are targeted. So where it suits somebody, he fights him. Where it doesn't suit him, he supports him in a different way. And it's been clearly brought out how, Brigadier Dahiya talked about this terror linked with drug money, how the ISIS was funding terror through drug money, through Afghanistan, how it came. I mean, there are many, many interesting anecdotes about these things. There's a person called Iqbal Malhotra. He's written about this extensively. He studied about this extensively. And he talks how this money laundering was carried out even through the President Zia's time, through banks such as BCCI. So are states using terror as a tool of strategic policy, and should they be encouraged to do that? Now, a terrorist survives on two main things. The first is the support from the locals, and the second thing is finance. And finance gives them the ability to buy weapons, to use it and target the state. So finance is a key to survival of a terrorist organization, and the removal of Pakistan from the grey list of FATF recently. I mean, I would not like to discuss it here, but I'm sure everybody is aware of it. And isn't it a coincidence that this has occurred at a time when no one knows where the missile overflew, which targeted Al-Zawahiri? So one of the options could be over Pakistan territory. Other option could be over Central Asian republics. Other option could be over Iran. So, I mean, it's your guess. And also there's been talk of the assistance being given by Pakistan to the West in form of ammunition supplies during the Ukraine conflict, because the Ukrainians needed certain amount of ammunition which is manufactured in Pakistan. So why it's being done now, I cannot answer, but I mean, these are all pointers. You've had Afghanistan, terrorism in Afghanistan, terrorism in Iraq, terrorism in Lebanon. You know how Israel has, countered terrorism over the years from various terror groups, including the Hamas. And now they use it for, nurturing more organization. Will it lead to a rebuilding of momentum or not? That's left for everybody to see. So the future lies in de-radicalization, cooperation, and of course, tackling this through awareness through social media.
Sir, we are concluding your presentation because the audio connectivity is very bad, and we are moving on now to the question and answer session for this program. Hopefully, you would be able to sort of participate in Q&A. I am reading through the questions in the chat function. And before we started this program, there was a suggestion / comment from Saptarishi Basu. And that is basically taking the bull by horn. At this point in time, there's no internationally agreed upon definition of terrorism. And that is a sad state of affairs because of geopolitics. Various countries are not able to come to agreement as to what is terrorism. And if you cannot decide what is terrorism, you cannot, specify what counter-terrorism measures you can take because you don't agree on terrorism definition. So I will start this question with Dr. Pusarla. Dr. Pusarla, do you have any observations on lack of universal definition of terrorism? Kindly unmute yourself.
Kofi Annan has also mentioned in his observations, he has brought out a technical report in 2005, where he listed that when nations are talking terrorism, but then none of them shown any interest to unite behind a definition of terrorism. So, which has been the real difficulty in calling really identifying what constitutes the terrorism. So this has now descended into what is my terrorist versus your terrorist, or somebody calling good terrorism versus bad terrorism, and then they are taking umbrage under these definitions. So this has been one part of it, and to that, now there are specific challenge. Now there is now added confusion to this existing definition of terrorism, with the West bringing about what is called as racially or ethnically motivated extremism and violent nationalism, right-wing extremism, and xenophobia. All these are also being added to the long list of terrorism, as if it is not enough how we can resort to identify what is terrorism. They are now just piling up different definitions to this terrorism. So this is where the things stand, and this is really a biggest challenge.
Okay. Brigadier Dahiya, do you want to join on this issue? Lack of unanimous definition of terrorism?
Yes. That there is no agreed upon definition of terrorism, despite India also was repeatedly bringing out this point that we must have a definition to start with. But like I finished my presentation with an observation that terrorism is very much part of a state policy for most of the countries. Every country at some time in its history or the other has supported a people or a group who have been considered as a terrorist by another state. Therefore, it's easy for India to say that anybody who comes from outside with arms and terrorizes my people should be termed as terrorists. But this definition is not not acceptable to somebody else. And particularly the United Nations Security Council, which is going to be the final arbiter of accepting or not accepting a definition, each one of those countries have something to do with terrorism. So how do you expect that any definition of this nature will be accepted? So let's be practical about it. I don't see any hope that any agreed upon definition will be available anytime soon.
Thank you, Brigadier Dahiya. Those are very wise words, and I am going to General Jagatbir Singh for his observations about lack of unanimous definition of terrorism. General Jagatbir Singh, kindly unmute yourself, sir.
Your very righteously acceptable definition of terrorism, various academicians, by various scholars, in various military writing. As far as India is concerned, sir, I think there's been orders and rules in the Supreme Court also. So whoever with the intent to overthrow the government by law, establish or to strike terror in people of any section of the people and alienate them or create disharmony or adversely affect harmony within various social groups and, harm, kill, is all linked with terror, sir. Now, whether the issue always remains as one man's terror is another man's freedom fighter, sir. So that problem remains in India, it remains everywhere. So how do you view a terrorist, sir? As far as we are concerned, it is the acts he does, how he acts against the lawful laws of the state and how he harms the people and the manner in which he does it in the view of alienating a section of people to achieve his aims. I think that is the thing. But the challenge globally lies in accepting a common denominator as a definition of terrorists and then putting these various people within that definition and then blacklisting them. And that is where I wanted to say that China is constantly supporting.
We are having again connectivity problem with General Jagatbir Singh. So I'll go on to the next question. And next question is again from Saptarishi Basu. What is the difference between subconventional warfare, sabotage behind the operations, special forces operations, and terrorism and insurgency? And I'll address the question to Brigadier Rumel Dahiya.
Frankly speaking, there's enough literature on this subject, and I would rather than taking everybody's time in a long monologue on the subject, I would suggest to Mr. Basu to just Google it, and you'll find so much of it. Briefly speaking, let's say subconventional warfare is anything which is below the threshold of a conventional war. Basically, is a subconventional war. Today, of course, the definition extends to hybrid war and below the conventional level, small-scale war. So these are all semantics, nuances. There are nuances in it. But any war which does not involve full-scale, large war, generally referred to as fighting an insurgency, for example, or a continued terrorism, state of terrorism, would be called as some conventional warfare. Sabotage, as we know, is carrying out covert operations with a view to disrupt military, economic, infrastructural, or public facilities, which can discomfort people and also bring bad name to the government, show it in a weak light, poor light. That would be a sabotage. Behind the lines operation, I suppose he means that, is basically, again, not facing the troops deployed for defense of a country, but in the interiors, when you go out and carry out certain operations, some conventional operations, that would be behind the line operations. Special forces operations basically pertain to operations carried out by special forces. Now, obviously, when you say special forces, they would be, although they can also be strategic in nature, but that would be as part of conventional warfare. But special forces operations are generally small-scale, covert operations to deal with a pointed threat or a small objective, wherein you quickly carry out an operation and disengage, come back from there. Terrorism and insurgency, frankly speaking, they both involve violence, but primarily there are three main differences, which are the target, objective, and the method. In case of insurgency, target is the government or the security forces of the government, be it civil police, central armed police forces, or the army. And objective is basically to overthrow the government by changing the system. Either this could be based on religion or it could be based on ideology, like the left-wing insurgency or something. Generally, they are long-term, whereas terrorism could be short-term. Terrorism could be random, insurgency is more organized. And so these are the primary differences between terrorism and insurgency. When you talk of insurgency, what comes to mind is that it's a long-term, sustained kind of effort, passes through various phases. Terrorism, on the other hand, is less organized. It could be diffused. It could be carried out by various different groups, not directly connected to each other, and with the main aim of terrorizing people rather than just changing a system. Although changing the system may also be a stated objective, but their very methods make it impossible to change the system as such. So these are the main differences that come to mind immediately.
Thank you, Brigadier Dahiya. I think you have explained it very beautifully, so we don't need to elaborate on it further. I'll go to the next question. It is from Anushri Gisard from Ahmedabad. Pakistan, Turkey, and China are said to be involved in creating and nurturing pockets within India that help in shaping a narrative which is antithetical to our national interests. Do counter-terrorism operations factor in this? What could be done to tackle this? I will start with Dr. Pusarla.
This is what has been the crux of a Delhi declaration. This is they have identified social media networks, and then they crowdfunding platforms, and also all other communication, highly evolved communication technologies, which have helped in bringing together these anti-nationalist forces together with the terrorists, and also this has also helped them to have a free flow of access to the finances. So having all the three things together through the medium of technology, it has helped these terrorist forces to easily spread their to propagate or to spread their propaganda, and then create some kind of a narrative and unrest in the society. That is first aspect of it, and precisely this is what these three countries, Pakistan, Turkey, and China, are banking upon, and that is how they are doing it. So what India has suggested is to counter all these kind of technologies, the member countries should come up with some kind of an innovation. And they so as part of it, what they have suggested is besides the existing initiatives of UN, there are some initiatives by the industry. So what declaration suggests is there should be a collaboration between these initiatives from the UN, from the industry, and between the academicians, intellectuals, and the civil society organizations, so that we can combine, so that all these people togetherly come out with some kind of a framework to develop these anti or counter narratives to these terrorist forces. So that is one aspect of it. So here in Delhi Declaration, they have highlighted the role of financial intelligence units, and also the role of civil societies, and also some of the UN institutions to identify some of the important counter-terrorism mechanisms practiced by certain countries, so that it can be enforced by all of them, or at least be practiced by other countries. For example, UAE has come up with beautiful counter-terror mechanisms. So those can be implemented by all other members as well. UAE has just joined or it's going to be the member of UNSC in the next session. So those kind of measures can be implemented for this successive countering of these narratives.
Thank you, Dr. Pusarla. May I invite General Jagatbir Singh to address the same question about Pakistan, Turkey, and China?
I think Dr. Pusarla has covered these issues extremely well and lucidly. The issue is increasing as far as the collusion between Pakistan and China is concerned. In almost all fields, we are seeing manifestation of this collusion between Pakistan and China countering India. Terrorism is just one of the fields. There's great economic linkages with the CPEC coming in. There's, collusivity in the nuclear realm. There's collusivity as far as conventional arms and equipment goes. There's collusivity you'll see in sharing of intelligence. And whether there'll be collusivity when another war takes out, whether India is prepared, where India is prepared to face what we call a two-front war. And now we talk about a two-and-a-half-front war where terrorism, as Brigadier Dahiya talked about, a hybrid conflict existing at the same time will take place. Now, what we are seeing today is the increasing collusivity between Pakistan and Turkey, sir. And Turkey has been targeting India to a great degree. How this will manifest itself in future, how we will be able to counter the effect of Turkey. Turkey is wanting to come back to the, preeminent position it occupied during the Ottoman regime. And, it's now coming up as far as that is concerned. But it's got I think presently the dangers for India exist as far as terrorism goes. But mainly for us, the problem, Turkey can give it certain amount international support. Turkey can provide it with certain amount of technology. Turkey can provide it with certain amount of equipment. Terror groups taking safe haven in Afghanistan is concerned, and the drug money that will flow to through Afghanistan to fund these terror outfits, and the destability that may occur again in the valley because of this coming in.
Thank you, Major General. I'm going to invite Brigadier Dahiya now. Brigadier Dahiya.
Today, actually, wars of today also involve narratives and counter narratives. War in Ukraine, for example, is a prime example of narratives shaping people's opinion about it and their choices. As far as China is concerned, I think they are mainly focused on creating pockets of influence amongst the decision makers and influencers who can reduce this distrust against China, and in fact put the blame on India for the kind of relationship that we have with China. Also, makes Chinese aggressions, Chinese perfidies against India more acceptable, more tolerable within India. Now, that would be their main aim. I do not think so far, despite knowing that Mr. Paresh Barua has been roaming around in some part of China somewhere, despite that China is not too much into it so far, as they haven't been directly, the state as such hasn't been, contributing too much in terrorism in India. But obviously they are busy creating pockets of influence which can, enhance their narrative within India. As far as Turkey is concerned, I think they are more driven by two things. One is that they have a very long-standing and robust relationship with Pakistan. So supporting Pakistan in every endeavor is their part. Of course, they sometimes blame us for supporting Cyprus against them and Greece against them. That's why, which is not really a genuine thing. And having stayed in Turkey, I can claim to understand the situation a little more closely. But at the same time, I think it is more because of the personality of the president, who wants to become a new caliphate. New sultan, somebody who is respected more in the Islamic world. And with a view to that he's trying to spread his influence among Muslims of India, knowing fully well that he has no direct strategic interest in India, nor can he confront India otherwise, because if that was so, he would have cut off economic relationship with India. India's trade with Turkey is about $10 billion, whereas with Pakistan, it hasn't even crossed $1 billion, despite relationship being topsy-turvy in other fields like security and all that. So that is one. I think we have to find an answer to narrative through a plausible, workable, believable counter narrative. That is the only thing we can say. This has to do something with how we within India, our societal relationships develop, how we take religious issues a little more seriously and try and reduce the friction points. That kind of a narrative, plus the economic development, inclusive economic development within the country. Also, of course, pointing out the pitfalls of the policy that Turkey has been following. For example, they have totally, they spoiled their economy because of the policies that they're facing. And instead of Davutoglu starting off with, no problem with the neighbors, it's 100% problem with all the neighbors. So those kinds of counter narratives, educating the people is what is more important for us than to confront them directly with straightway, running after the people who are involved in this kind of thing.
Thank you, Brigadier Dahiya. We are coming to the end of this program. There is one comment by Mr. Ron Jagannathan, and I'm going to read it out. State actors are responsible for the rise of terrorism on humanity. I'm talking about heads of states with their own agenda. Terrorism as a geopolitical agenda. If the speakers agree, then call out the names you can identify. Please start from the top. I think in this program, there has been unanimity that 3 states definitely are involved in fostering international terrorism, and those 3 states have been specifically mentioned, starting with Pakistan, which is the fountainhead of global terrorism, or whatever you may call it. Second state is definitely China, which is colluding and reinforcing Pakistan's terrorist activities worldwide for geopolitical gains. And thirdly, the country that has been named is Turkey. I may add Afghanistan. I may add a couple of other countries, but there are agencies also that foster terrorism. So yes, it are some state actors. The state actors involve actually sometimes agencies spreading terrorism in a different country. So the issue is very complex. We have some understanding. There will never be any unanimity internationally about the definition of terrorism or what are, terror actors, whether they are state actors or non-state actors or hybrid actors. There will never be any unanimity because of the geopolitics. Each country has to safeguard its own interest. And time has come for any particular country to strengthen its own comprehensive national power to deal with the challenge of terrorism. That's the only way to defeat it. International agreements usually are non-binding, and international agreements are disregarded when it does not suit your own geopolitical interests. So we have to be wiser and learn from those experiences. Yes, you have to have some international support, but mind you, international agencies, UN organizations will never be 100% with you. Coupled with that, varying definitions. For example, I may say that there was a global war on terror in United States, but when the administration changed and Democratic Party led Obama administration took charge of the US administration, it changed the definition and narrative. It no longer used the word terrorism, it became a dirty word. Global war or terrorism became a dirty word in United States, and Obama administration started talking about countering violent extremism. I think it was a euphemism to rationalize and give a free pass to some of the terrorists. So you understand when you're talking about the sole hyperpower, changing the narrative to suit the political interests of the ruling administration. Those are the kinds of problems one deals with. So for any country to safeguard one's national interests, you are advised to increase your comprehensive national power and have your own spine to be dealing with this scourge of terrorism. It's not conceivable that in near future the fountainhead of terrorism will stop its terror activities. And that is something very important. I will invite my co-host here, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori, if he wants to make any comments. Mr. Pachori? We can't hear you.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
A wonderful discussion, Adityanjee. Thank you for inviting all the learned people here on this platform. Yeah, you were definitely right about it. Like in recent years also, like when you mentioned about the Obama administration, they changed the way that like terrorism need to be addressed. For example, the one of the example was like with the Talibans also. It used to be Talibani terrorist, and late at some point of time they become Talibani fighters, and then that narrative also changed, and they become, partner in peace. So that is very strange thing. And it is not only with the Taliban and other groups also. The same thing was done by Pakistan also. They call their these terrorist groups as the fighters, mujahids, and other groups. So yeah, that's all. And about the BCCI that Jagatbir Singh ji was mentioning, that was really amusing part of the history. And like the CIA operation was to gather all the frauds exist in this whole world and make one platform for them to do the money laundering. And the more you read about the BCCI scandal, the more you feel amused about all these things.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Ripudaman, for your comments.
Thank you.
And those, we are coming to end of this seminar. My heartfelt thanks to Dr. Pusarla, Brigadier Rumel Dahiya, Major General Jagatbir Singh. I'm sorry we had some connectivity issues, so some of the things we were not able to hear, but I think we had a very educational, very informative discussion and presentations. I'm also thankful to our audience on a Sunday morning in US and Sunday evening in India. They joined us for this particular roundtable discussion that shows that how seriously they consider this topic to be of importance, national importance. Finally, I would like to thank Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori, Mr. Vijay Subramaniam, Mr. Rajiv Verma, for behind the scene activities that help me organize these programs. So my sincere and heartfelt thanks to all three of them. And with that, I'm going to end this program. The video recording of this program will be available on our YouTube channel, and we'll also put on other platforms, including Rumble and Odyssey. So thank you very much indeed. Very pleased to host all of you for this particular program. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.